Apple has some big plans for its smallest iPad, including a brand new redesign that will dramatically shrink the bezels and fit in a larger display while still keeping the mini form factor that has so many diehard fans, coupled together with a brand new chip and even more advanced features. This iPad mini could be the ultimate small tablet and a one of a kind for Apple. Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here. And in the past when I had, to do reports on the iPad mini, I had to bring you kind of some sobering news that Apple might not actually give us the iPad mini complete redesign that, it definitely deserves, and instead just ship kind of like another spec bump with just some very minor design changes. However, a bunch of recent reports from very credible sources are taking that old rumor and blowing it out of the water, and it looks like the iPad mini is coming, and it is also getting that complete redesign that we all desperately want. And it's going to be the biggest design change to the iPad mini ever since its introduction back in November of 2012. Now, a lot of this information comes out of a fresh report from Mark Gurman, who says the new iPad mini is rumored to have a brand new 8.4-inch display, which would be an increase from the current 7.9-inch display size that the iPad mini has had for around the past 9 years. Apple will do this, of course, by giving this iPad mini the same treatment it gave the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, by reducing the bezels all around the device and getting rid of the top forehead and bottom chin. Now, past rumors had this iPad mini at anywhere from 8.4 to a 9-inch display. Now, what this recent report tells me is that with an 8.4-inch display, the iPad mini is basically going to have the same exact body size as the current iPad mini, and the physical footprint of that iPad mini is going to pretty much be the same. I only bring this up because before we heard reports that the screen could be as big as 9 inches, but 8.4 inches makes a lot more sense to me to still keep it in that mini form factor. And even though Apple has been making almost every iPad bigger in recent years, I think it would be a real shame if the iPad mini had any noticeable size increase, because even though it would still be mini if it had a 9-inch display, mini compared to all the other iPads on the market, it just wouldn't capture that same feeling that the original iPad mini had, and I think a lot of people really like that form factor. Well, at least if you like iPad minis, which I do. Now, as for other changes, we pretty much have the entire roadmap laid in front of our feet at this point, because all we have to do is look at the recent iPad Air. The iPad mini is just going to be a smaller version of that iPad Air. And as John Prosser reported, features from the Air are coming to the Mini, like the Touch ID sensor being embedded into the power button. Again, that first appeared on the redesigned iPad Air. And, don't expect Face ID to be on this Mini when it's not on the Air. Of course, like most modern iPad designs, Apple is also leaning into the decision to use USB-C on these devices instead of the Lightning port. So that means the iPad Mini is going to be using a USB-C port and ditching the Lightning port. Come on. I think anyone could kind of put this stuff together. And of course, finally, the chip that the iPad mini will have is, you guessed it, the same exact A14 chip as the iPad Air. Sorry for those of you dreaming of an M1 equipped iPad mini. An M1 equipped iPad mini, actually. I'd buy it. Now, honestly, at this point, we shouldn't expect the iPad mini to ship with really any exclusive features besides a smaller physical footprint. And although I am a big fan of the iPad mini form factor, this will ultimately be the same story as the last iteration of the iPad mini, just basically a smaller version of the iPad Air. Now, there are a few unanswered questions about this device, and the first is, will it ship with the same diverse color selection as the recent iPad Air, or will this be more of a niche device with limited color options like silver, space gray, and gold? If I had to put my own speculation on this, I don't have any inside information, even though the iPad mini probably won't sell in the same sales volume as something like the iPad Air, I think Apple will give us the same color options because they've already given that attention to even more niche products like the AirPods Max. I would imagine the iPad mini would sell more units than the AirPods Max. Another big open question is the accessories. Now, if Apple is moving to USB-C on the iPad mini, it means that the first generation Apple Pencil will no longer work with this device because it requires a Lightning port for pairing. This basically means that Apple will have to bring over support for the second generation Apple Pencil. However, just looking at the size of my current Apple Pencil, I'm not sure how that would fit on the mini. I think it might just be a tad bit too big and take up the entire side of the new iPad mini and possibly even hang off the side when it's magnetically connected. I think that would look pretty inelegant. But I think there's a good possibility we could see a new, smaller Apple Pencil. We actually saw some leaks regarding an Apple Pencil 3 that could be a new, smaller version for the iPad mini. And if I'm putting two and two together, I think this would be a great opportunity for Apple to start leaving behind support for the first generation Apple Pencil and introducing this second option with a lower price point, probably get it around $100. And it could even be used as an entry-level version of the Apple Pencil, because even though it might be smaller, it could still be used on the bigger iPad Air and iPad Pro. And while the original second-gen Apple Pencil may be an inelegant solution and just a little bit too big for the iPad mini, if it can still fit on that magnetic attachment and still pair and charge on the iPad mini, well, I see no reason why the iPad mini wouldn't support that Apple Pencil, even if it isn't the perfect pairing. Now, another big question is, will Apple be adding any support for keyboard accessories? So I'm kind of unclear if this iPad will have smart connectors on the back, because Apple making a super cramped version of this smart keyboard or a super tiny Apple Magic keyboard, like what would that even cost? It just doesn't seem likely to me. Apple in the past, especially under Steve Jobs, would make fun of the cramped keyboards of their competitors, especially in the netbook days, and Apple has never officially supported a iPad mini with a first-party keyboard accessory. So I don't see any reason why Apple would support a first-party keyboard option for this iPad mini. However, we will probably still see a lot of third-party options and possibly having a partner right at launch like Logitech to make the, keyboard cover that Apple necessarily doesn't want to make. As for pricing, I think we're going to have a lot of upset people watching this segment of the video because unfortunately, and I do mean unfortunately, I think the iPad mini is going to not stay at the same $400 starting price, and I don't think it's getting any cheaper. Because when Apple redesigned the iPad Air, they raised the price of that iPad from $499 to $599. So I think it's reasonable to expect the same treatment for the mini here, and it will probably get the same price increase of $100 more. So a starting price of $499. And I also suspect it would come with the same exact storage configurations as the iPad Air. So 64 gigabytes of starting storage, and then at the top end, 256 gigabytes of storage for an additional $150 more. As for when we can expect this iPad mini to launch, well, I have good news, and that is that we won't probably have to wait too much longer, because Gurman is saying that this iPad mini is already a go for this fall. So we should expect to see this iPad mini announced within the coming months, possibly as soon as Apple's usual September event. But so far, that is all we know about the rumored redesign of this new iPad mini. And if you couldn't tell, I am just super excited for this product because the iPad mini has always held a special place in my heart, and it was actually the first iPad that I personally owned. And I always appreciated its small and unique form factor when you compared it against the bigger iPads. It really did deliver a different experience. But enough about what I think. I want to hear what you think of all these iPad mini rumors. Are you as excited as I am? Can you see yourself purchasing a redesign of the iPad mini, even if it's going to be at a premium price point? And what sort of features are you looking forward to? Do you think Apple will actually make a first-party keyboard for this and change some of their past stances on smaller keyboards? Let me know in the comments below. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. But as always, if you like this video, make sure you give it a like. If you want to see more from the channel, obviously make sure you're subscribed. And if you want to help the channel out in any way, make sure you check out some of the links in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Probably could have used a little bit more gel today. Ugh, whatever.